What's going on, everybody? I'm Hoops and Hip Hop, and welcome to what should be the 19th episode of the Pokeblock Podcast. I forgot to check that before we started, but I'm pretty sure it's getting kind of hard to keep track of, to be honest, because we're starting to get up there in the numbers. But in today's episode, we're going to be kind of having a sort of fun, offhand topic, if you will, because as far as like goings on in the Pokemon world right now, we're kind of in between a lot of stuff because, as we talked about in last week's episode, there's the new anime series that's about to be revealed this Sunday, but that's still a couple days away, so we've kind of talked about what we can talk about there. We haven't really had a new Sword and Shield news drop since the Surfetch drop, which we've already discussed. So there's really, we've pretty much covered everything that's currently going on, and we're just in the middle of, waiting for more information. So because of that, we are going to be talking about just a for fun discussion type of topic that's going to revolve around my 5 biggest wishes for Pokemon. So it's going to be pretty fun, but before we get into that, we are actually going to be talking about a couple different things of note that were actually revealed just before I started recording related to both the anime and Pokemon Sword and Shield. It's actually really funny because sometimes I wait until the last possible second before I upload these podcasts to record them just because I'm a terrible human being who likes to procrastinate, but it actually comes in super handy a lot of the time because essentially right before I record, something will pop up that is super pertinent, that is something that I would need to talk about. And because I haven't recorded yet, because I'm a terrible procrastinator, I'm able to include it in the podcast. And that's exactly what happened now, because I would say 2 hours or so before the podcast, and then again literally 5 minutes before the podcast, we had 2 separate announcements relating to the anime and Sword and Shield that are a pretty significant development. The first with the anime had to do with a poster for the new series possibly being leaked, and it hasn't been confirmed to be real yet, but it was reported on by Cerebi, and if Cerebi is posting something, they at least can somewhat trust the legitimacy of it, even if it can't be confirmed, so it's worth talking about at the very least. And essentially what this poster was, it didn't reveal a whole lot, but what it did show was Ash's, what is basically going to be Ash's primary new companion in the series, and then it also showed that the animation style from Sun and Moon is being carried over. As far as, unfortunately, I won't be able to show it because it's a podcast, visual only, darn freaking format. I would love to be able to show it directly to you guys, but because I can't, I would recommend going to cerebi.net or their Twitter if you have Twitter and looking it up that way. But essentially, this character, he's kind of hard to describe. He kind of looks like How a little bit, but just different. He's not anyone we've seen in the actual Sword and Shield game yet. But basically, he's got a Scorbunny. Obviously, Ash has Pikachu, which confirms that Ash is back. So there's that as well, I guess. And it basically kind of just has them on a picture with all of the 8 regions kind of circling around them. And as far as the character design goes on this new character, he looks awesome. I think he looks really cool. He looks really interesting. Looks like he'll have a lot to offer. But if this does indeed end up being not real, I will be disappointed in the fact that the Sun and Moon anime is, or the style, I should say, is being carried over. Because, while the animation, there's been this big discussion and debate on this topic, and basically there is a difference between art style and animation. Everyone will say the animation is trash, but then animation nerds, essentially, I love you if you're an animation nerd, I'm just using that as a general term, will come out of the woodworks and they'll say, well, the animation is actually great. It's the art style you're referring to. So basically, there's a difference between animation and art style. And while the animation might be very fluid and nice, the art style is definitely lacking. It's basically what everyone complains about with the Sun and Moon anime. It's really what brings it down, in my personal opinion. And if that is true that it's coming back with the Galar anime, I think that is hugely disappointing, because the fact we were going to get a new series was kind of an opportunity to break away from that. It made a lot of sense that this style would be in Alola, because Alola is kind of like a vacation type of region, and so it would make sense to have that style for a more lighthearted feel. But now that we're going away from that, it makes sense to return to form, so to speak. So the fact that they would leave it is not only disappointing, but also kind of confusing at the same time. So that part of me really hopes that this whole thing isn't real, because that would be a big disappointment for me. Although if it is real, I mean, I'm willing to hear it out at the very least, because this new character that Ash is with does seem to be somewhat interesting. But we will have to wait and see until Saturday to know for sure. As far as Sword and Shield goes, basically what was announced literally 5 minutes before I started recording, it's the funniest thing. Apparently next Friday, starting at literally about the same time, there's going to be a 24-hour live stream of Sword and Shield, but it's not going to be like regular gameplay. It's basically going to be a live stream of an area within the game that apparently is known as the Luminous Forest. It's basically one of the mysterious forests in the game. I want to say it might be the one that's like by the fairy looking area that has like the gingerbread houses. It might be that one. Don't quote me on it, but it could be. But basically it's going to be a live stream of this area. And what I imagine it's going to be is just literally kind of like, basically sort of like if you had a camera set up in the forest and you just let it run. That's essentially what it's going to be. It's just going to be like the forest just sitting there doing its thing, like trees waving in the breeze, bushes moving around, like really not a whole lot happening. But then every once in a while, out of the bushes will come a new Pokemon. It'll run across the screen, then everyone will freak out, and there'll be like a couple different reveals that way. So very interesting way to reveal new information, to say the least, but also really interesting and kind of like exciting at the same time, because it's so different. So that is going on. Who knows what will actually be revealed? And the as fun as this is, the kind of frustrating part is that the live stream is 24 hours, and you obviously don't know when that Pokemon is going to run across the screen. So like if you want to see it happen, like when it happens, you've basically got to like keep the live stream open 24 hours the whole time and like basically be glued to it, which is kind of funny. But there definitely will be some reveals, like I said. They'll most assuredly be covered in some type of trailer afterwards. But yeah, I'm definitely excited for that, whatever it entails, because obviously, like I said, means new Sword and Shield news is coming, new reveals. It's a different way to do it. It's exciting. We also get to see like a new area of the game at the same time. So I am absolutely down, because that does start at like, it starts just a few hours before I normally post my podcast episodes. I don't know that I'll be able to talk about it in next week's episode, just because, I mean, I could do my whole last second thing that I was just mentioning, but because I don't know if anything is going to pop up in the live stream within that span of time that like it starts before the live stream, I just don't know if I'll be able to like, I don't know if I'll be able to trust that there's going to be something to reveal that I'll be able to cover. So next week, I probably won't be able to talk about it, just as a heads up, but we'll obviously talk about it the next week after that. And of course, we'll have a great, fun discussion anyway. So that is essentially what is going on with Sword and Shield and the anime. I loved that I was a procrastinator and waited to record so I could actually talk about that, because talking about new information is always the funnest thing to do, I feel like, in the podcasts. And the fact that there was even that little development was awesome. But that's pretty much all there is to say. So we'll have to basically keep waiting the next week or so to find out the full details on those. And in the meantime, we could now go ahead and start our topic for the day, which, like I said a few minutes ago, is not the top 5, but basically just the 5 biggest wishes I have for Pokemon. Essentially, like in a nutshell, these things are basically like the biggest, I guess you could say, the biggest dreams I have for Pokemon, what I want to see most like happen within the Pokemon franchise moving forward. And yeah, and I'm basically just going to go through them, explain why I think why I think that would be great, why I think it should happen. And with this kind of topic, obviously I could include whatever I wanted, but I did want to kind of keep it like somewhat more realistic. I'm definitely not like holding myself back too much, but I did want to keep it somewhat more realistic, like to things that I feel like could happen at some point in the future. And basically just the things that I've been personally wanting and waiting for like ever, that have always been on my mind, like since I've been a Pokemon fan, essentially. So that is the gist of what we're going to be talking about, just things that I really, really want to see within Pokemon. And without any further ado, let's just go ahead and get into it. So the first two things I'm going to talk about are a little like smaller in terms of like how badly I want them. We'll get into the things that I'm just dying for towards the end. But the first one I'm going to talk about is Pokemon Let's Go Johto and or the Pokemon Let's Go series to continue. And the reason why I say this is because when it comes to Pokemon Let's Go, it's really, really interesting because they obviously were games that kind of split the fan base a little bit in terms of their opinion on them, but they still sold incredibly well. They still did incredibly well. I know people that like are hardcore Pokemon fans that just weren't the biggest fans of these games, which honestly I can't really understand, if I'm being completely honest, because while I do know that these games are a little bit different to the main series games, they have some things that operate differently, they don't deviate that much. Like they're basically like, I would say 85% a regular main series game and like 15% like its own different type of thing. So you essentially have a main series game in terms of the gameplay on your hands here, and we also got an HD remake of Pokemon Yellow on the Switch. Like, I don't really know what there is to complain about in terms of like not enjoying that experience if you're a Pokemon fan. So that part kind of confuses me, but obviously to each his own. But with that being said, regardless of like how one person feels about it over another, the game still sold incredibly well. Before Smash Bros came out, these games were the fastest selling games that had ever been on the Switch, and they sold over 10 million copies as of June, I believe. And so they've done incredibly well. And it was mentioned like during the promotional release, I guess you could say, of Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, by Junichi Masuda himself, in fact, who was the director of these games, that if these games did really well, there could potentially be the possibility for more Let's Go. Someone asked him about that. He basically said, if the games sell well, it's what the fans want. Like, nothing's impossible, basically. So because of that, and because of how well the games did, it essentially opens the door for that possibility. And the reason why I really, really want it to happen, outside of just the fact that I really enjoyed the Let's Go games, is because it gives us the opportunity to see every region, especially some of the earlier ones that we've kind of already passed by with remakes, the chance to be able to see in full HD. And I'm particularly like just really wanting this with Let's Go Johto, because obviously we've already had Heart Gold, Soul Silver, which were my favorite Pokemon games of all time. Johto is my favorite region. And so it's not like we're going to be getting a new remake of Johto anytime soon in any other way. So this would be a great opportunity to see Johto in HD, and then from there, just being able to like see every region in full HD, like that would just be such a fun thing. And obviously with this would evolve at that point into kind of its own side series, which would even be more perfect because people who aren't the biggest fans of the games, they wouldn't have to worry that it's like taking over the franchise, because it's just going to be its own side series, kind of like maybe like certain spin-offs are, like Mystery Dungeon or Pokemon Ranger. Like, it would be that sort of thing, so it wouldn't get in the way of the main series, but it would just be a fun little side spin-off series that happens every couple of years. It would be kind of interesting to see how it would coincide with the main remakes, like Pokemon Diamond and Pearl remake, for instance, but nevertheless, it is something I really want to see, particularly for Let's Go Johto. So that is my first pick on the list. My fourth pick on the list that I really want to see happen at some point is the return of Mega Evolution. And this one's a bit different because it's not just like Mega Evolutions coming back and like receiving more Mega Evolutions that I want so badly. It's what that would mean for the franchise as a whole if that happened. Mega Evolutions are obviously a super fan favorite feature. I love them. Basically, everyone who's anyone loves them. I don't know anyone who doesn't like Mega Evolutions because they're a great way of bringing new life to an old Pokemon, also making it competitively viable. You give it a new form. It's just a really, really great time. But for whatever reason, they decided to not continue with the Mega Evolution feature outside of Generation 6, and we have not seen any new Mega Evolution forms since Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and the Mega Evolutions are not even going to appear at all in Pokemon Sword and Shield. So the reason why I really want to see them back is just so we can have more because, like I said, they're a really, really fun feature. But on top of being a really, really fun feature, if they were to come back, that would tell us as Pokemon fans that Game Freak is kind of finally ready to just give the fans what they want because they've had this notorious track record of releasing new features and then not expanding on them in any games and just kind of keeping them exclusive to the game that they were introduced in and not developing them, not expanding on them, even though the fans really want it. And I think if Mega Evolutions were to return, that would signify that Game Freak is starting to listen. They're starting to give the fans what they want, which ultimately, like, even though they have the right to make their own game and what they want, like, in terms of their vision, listening to fans is something you should definitely be doing as a developer because it's going to result not only in your game being the most successful in terms of accepting that feedback, but it's also going to allow the game to be the best it can be as well, because why wouldn't you want to make what every single person who plays your game wants in the game? It just is kind of a no-brainer. So if they did that, that would kind of signify that they're starting to basically like listen and give the fans what they want. That has started to seem to be the case with the fact that regional variants are back in Sword and Shield with Galar form, so we'll just have to see if it expands eventually into Mega Evolution, but for that reason, I really want Mega Evolution back. The third one, and this is kind of where we start to get into the bigger picks, is going to be, and people, I know some of you are going to think, oh, this would never ever happen, but just hear me out. And basically, I, at some point, want to see a Breath of the Wild level Pokemon game. And what I mean by that is essentially a Pokemon game. I don't necessarily mean like Breath of the Wild with a Pokemon skin in that sense, because it's hard to tell how big and massive Pokemon will get in terms of having an open world and just like having like free exploration and stuff like that. I am going to get into that later, but ultimately right now it's hard to tell how far Pokemon will go with those concepts. What I mean by a Breath of the Wild Pokemon game is essentially a Pokemon game that just is fully fledged, fully developed, and just is no holds barred on how in-depth it is and just like the super, super amazing quality of it. Because when you play Breath of the Wild, you get the feel that they didn't hold anything back. They just went for it. They did it. Like, they freaking put their all into that game. And basically, that's kind of what I want to see with a Pokemon game. And there are similar features from Breath of the Wild that I want to see in this kind of Pokemon game. Like, I would love to see a Pokemon game with a big open world. I will get into... No, that's part of this. I'm trying to figure out like my thought process in terms of what I put on this list because I had a couple other things. But basically, yeah, I want to have an open world Pokemon game and a fully open world Pokemon game like Breath of the Wild. I'm not necessarily saying like I'm expecting it to be as big or anything like that, but I want a Pokemon game that's fully open world. So there's that. I want to see a Pokemon game that has voice acting like Breath of the Wild does. I would really want to see a Pokemon game that is seamless and has no loading screens within the overworld. So you could walk into a building. It's not going to have a loading screen. You can walk into basically anywhere and you're not going to have any loading screens at all outside of like some type of cutscene or something like that. Just making the game as seamless as possible. And these types of things, like I said, they would just add to the sense that Game Freak really put their all into a game, and it would just make the game that much more enjoyable. And the reason why I decided to put this on the list, even though like so many people say that a Breath of the Wild Pokemon game is never going to happen, is because with Sword and Shield, I believe we're on the stepping stone to that. Because Sword and Shield has a lot of those elements. It has obviously the fully 3D view. It's got an open world section. It's not fully open world. And we don't know if voice acting is going to be in the game, but basically that, along with like loading screens being seamless and stuff like that, that's kind of just like, those things I feel like are just a natural step up if they're not going to be in the game. And with Pokemon has always kind of been a little bit behind in terms of that type of stuff, which is okay because Pokemon is very much its own unique thing. Game Freak are very much a unique situation in terms of how they're developing as developers and growing. So the fact that Pokemon is kind of moving at its own pace is fine, but I think with Pokemon Sword and Shield being the way it is, it definitely lends itself to the idea that we will get there eventually, and I really hope we do, because as much as Sword and Shield is looking like a dream come true as a Pokemon fan, it definitely can get even better from what we've seen. And to be able to see something like that would really be a dream come true. Then moving on to the second one that we're going to talk about, we're going to go to the anime this time, switch gears a little bit. And what I want to see from the anime is, whether it be the current series that we've got going on or a new series, or basically just any Pokemon anime related thing that ultimately comes out in the future, I want to see a more mature Pokemon anime series, a la Pokemon Generations, Pokemon Origins, nothing too dark, but more mature, that has a more story-driven narrative and is more narrative-focused. The biggest detractor for me when it came to the Pokemon anime was the fact that it was kind of focusing a little bit like, it's hard to say too much because obviously Pokemon is a kid's franchise, but it was focusing a little bit too hard in my eyes on that younger demographic and not really appealing as much to that older demographic. And then on top of that, something that it's probably the biggest personal problem I have with the anime is that the story is kind of like just non-existent. There is a light story in that Ash is trying to get the gym badges. Sometimes the plot of one episode will connect to the plot of another episode, but by and large, the episodes have a flavor of the day type of format where one thing happens in one episode and by the end it's completely resolved, it's completely done, and you move on to the next episode, and what happens in the next episode isn't related to what happened in the episode prior. And what I would want is basically an overarching plot and story where there's a singular goal that's going on that the protagonists work towards each and every episode, and it just builds on itself until the point where we get to this big climactic finish, much like many and most other animes do, whether it be Avatar: The Last Airbender, whether it be like basically any other popular anime. They usually have that big overarching story. And I know someone's going to say, Avatar isn't an anime. Well, you know what? It's basically an anime, so deal with it. When I was a kid, this was even a problem as a kid. Like, this isn't just I'm an adult now, so this is a problem I have with the anime. This was even a problem I had as a kid, and the reason why is because the two biggest shows for me at that time were Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! And Yu-Gi-Oh! Had the overarching story type of approach where there was a big goal that had to be taken care of. Every episode kind of built up towards that. The plot developed, like things happen, and it was just way more enjoyable because like there was action and there was a story to get invested in. But then with Pokemon, it was like the same thing was happening every time. The events that were happening didn't mean anything because they were only going to last an episode. And so that is what ultimately caused me as like an 8, 9, 10-year-old kid to side with Yu-Gi-Oh! As far as a show over Pokemon, even though I like Pokemon, because the show didn't grasp me enough. And I want a show that's not only appealing in terms of maturity level to older people, a la Pokemon Generations, but is also has a narrative that we all can get invested in, because I think there's so much untapped potential there for Pokemon. and it needs to take advantage of it. And the fact that they've teased it with these 2 different miniseries but haven't given us a full-fledged thing is just a crying shame, and needs to be rectified with a full-fledged series at some point in the future. So that is something I really, really want. And then, even though I said this was not a top 5, this is probably the thing I want the most from Pokemon, and that is at some point another game that has 2 explorable regions. The reason why Pokemon Silver and Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver are my favorite sets of Pokemon games is because they allow you to travel to Kanto in the post-game. They allow you to explore a full second region, which not only elevates the overall quality of those games like so much in terms of the experience, but obviously it provided what is easily the best Pokemon, or the best post-game, I should say, that's ever been seen in a Pokemon game, and it's not even close at this point. And the thing is this is the only time in Gold and Silver and their remakes that we've ever seen this type of thing happen. It has never happened in another Pokemon game, and I am just dying for it to happen. I cannot tell you, literally with every single Pokemon game I have played as it's come out, that has always been my hope. With Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, after I beat the game, I was looking around for that person that was going to take me to Johto and Kanto. In Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, after I beat the game, I was looking for that person who would take me to another region. Professor Oak was in the game. I was like, take me back to Kanto with you when you go home. And every time I go through a Pokemon game, that's always what I'm silently hoping for, even though I know it's probably not going to happen. And honestly, I just don't see any reason why it can't happen again, especially because we are improving so much with the quality of the games themselves, what they can do, the capacity that they can take on. Like, it's not like back in the day with Gold and Silver where they had to like compress and squeeze and fit everything into the cartridge. Like, we're on the Switch now. We can easily have 2 regions in the game if we want to have 2 regions in the game. And like, I'm not asking for like all the regions in the game or anything, or I'm not asking this to become the standard moving forward. I just want one more time. I don't care what game it's in. I just want one more time where we can play through a region and then have a whole second region to enjoy and look forward to in the post game. I just want to have that happen one more time. If you can give that to me one more time, I'll be happy. I'll never ask for anything from Pokemon again, and I will die a happy person. So yes, Game Freak, Junichi Masuda, I know you guys are regular listeners of my podcast, James Turner as well. I know you guys just live for my content, so I'm speaking to you right now when I say, please give this to us at some point in the future, because it would be absolutely incredible and would be, frankly, a long time coming, at least for me personally. But with all that being said, that pretty much rounds off my 5 biggest wishes for Pokemon, and that pretty much rounds off the episode as well. So if you are listening, wherever you're listening, I was going to say leave a comment below, but that's kind of hard to do on every single platform. So basically, let me know your feedback if you're able to, depending on where you're listening. Follow UCast Studios, Hoops and Hip Hop, on social media, on Twitter. Let us know your thoughts. And basically, in any way, shape, or form that you can let me know what you think about this, let me know what you think. Let me know your biggest wishes for Pokemon as well if you're able to. Follow the channel and follow the show if you haven't yet. Wherever you want to listen, we're on YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. So wherever is most convenient for you to listen to, go ahead and hit that follow button. And then follow me as well, Hoops and Hip Hop. If you haven't followed me before on all of those social media, my own personal YouTube, I talk about Pokemon all the time. It's great. So, with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. We'll be back next Friday as well with another great episode. We'll see kind of what happens with the development of the anime and Sword and Shield. That might affect what we talk about. It should be interesting either way. But yeah, as I said, hope you guys have a great weekend. I'll see you next week, and until the next one, I'll smell you guys later.